In late 2021, it was revealed that Guan Yu Zhu will race for Alfa Romeo starting from next year, and I'm sure it would have shocked many people to discover that when the lights go out for his debut, he will be the first ever Chinese Formula One driver. How could this be, for a country with over 1 billion inhabitants and a large part to play in the manufacturing of cars? In all honesty, I don't really know, but in 2004 the country finally got their foot in the door of the F1 world when they hosted the first ever Chinese Grand Prix on a brand new purpose-built circuit in Shanghai. Today we take a look at that Grand Prix in anticipation of China playing a much bigger part in the future of the sport. At the time, this was possibly the most high-tech racing facility in the world. It was fast and a little bit scary, although not as scary as how this guy pronounces the word sci-fi.
Walker's going to land any minute. It's like being on a set from a sci-fi movie. It's amazing.
That's right.
Michael Schumacher and Ferrari came into this round already as the world champions, although anyone who was expecting them to dominate would have had a surprise as he struggled through software glitches on the Friday and then had this Larry spin during the first part of qualifying. He would have to start from the pit lane. On pole due to Schumacher's issues was unsurprisingly the other Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello, who was fresh off a win at Monza. Second was Raikkonen, and then behind them were the impressively performing Button and Massa. Ralf Schumacher was notable starting from 5th, as this was his first race back after his awful crash at Indianapolis. And down in 12th was another returning driver, Jacques Villeneuve, who had taken a semi-forced sabbatical. When the race began, Parnis stalled the Toyota and luckily everyone avoided him. Barrichello made a good start and kept the lead, and look at Alonso getting up to 3rd into turn 1. Surprisingly, the first few corners were clean despite their difficult configuration, and watch this as Massa comes back at Button for 4th at the hairpin. In fact, Massa was on fire on this first lap. Imagine if he'd managed to make this move stick on Alonso. Remember, this was back in the days when he hadn't even scored a podium yet, so his qualifying performance and start here was somewhat of a breakthrough. On lap 3, Jenson Button demonstrated a masterclass of overtaking by prying the door open up the inside of Massa, taking 4th place in the process. Massa attempted to come back at him into the hairpin, but couldn't make it. Meanwhile, Fisichella was up to 6th after a strong start, so the Saubers were together on track. Unfortunately, Massa's early pace appeared to wane quickly as you watch him being passed by Fisichella and then muscled aside by Ralf Schumacher, almost dropping him behind Coulthard as well. It was the same error that he'd made when Button passed him that kicked all this off too, which has gotta sting. Now watch as Coulthard takes a look into turn 1 and Massa goes, "You don't play peekaboo with me, you Scottish scoundrel." Brake check! Luckily both cars were unharmed and somehow still pointing in the same direction. At this point there were two groups forming up in front, with Barrichello and Raikkonen together separated by about a second, and then Alonso and Button separated by about the width of a spring roll heading towards the hairpin, Button up the inside and taking 3rd place. This fight between future teammates was actually an important one in the Constructors' Championship, as BAR and Renault were fighting to be runners-up, advantage Jenson. Here are the leaders catching a slow-moving Minardi, or, as they called it in 2004, a Minardi. This is Jimmy Bruni returning to the pit slowly with a puncture that must have cost him, 6 miles per hour? It did lead to quite a close call in the pit lane, as he crept back right as Fisichella ducked him for his stop, but luckily Giancarlo's brakes worked fine and disaster was averted. Meanwhile, if you're interested in how Michael Schumacher's doing, he's running down in 13th place and making a move on Clean. Oh my goodness. Well, that's the danger of starting so far down the grid in a fast car. Christian Clean did not expect him to be steaming up the inside like that. I don't know if Schumacher has any damage, but surely something's bent from that. Clean, on the other hand, was forced to retire with damaged suspension. Oh hey look, it's the leaders, Barrichello and Raikkonen both in at exactly the same time for their first pit stops. Button then came in 2 laps later and was slightly slow away, but all okay and the order stayed the same. Back in the pack, Schumacher is still struggling and that's not going to help at all, a very similar spin to his qualifying excursion. Turbulent air appears to have been the main cause of that one, although surely frustration has to be up there as well. He did manage to quickly repass Fisichella though, who was heavy on fuel after his pit stop. And here's Schumacher versus Schumacher. My money's on Schumacher. As far as I know, this Grand Prix was the first time team radios were broadcasted on TV during a race, making this the first ever "Fernando is faster than you" call.
10 seconds. You're about 1 second slower than Fernando at the moment, Jack, so push hard, please.
The first of the front runners to pit for the second time was Kimi, and he was held up slightly by Bruni, just as Fisichella had been. Also, this is the first time I've recorded a random F1 race reviews episode since Kimi's retirement, and I'd just like to state again what a legend he is. 2021 Kimi may not have blown many people away, but 2004 Kimi, as shown here, was one of the very best drivers of all time. Remember, David Coulthard didn't score a single podium in 2004, and here's Raikkonen with a real chance of winning. Into the pits at the halfway mark in the race came Rubens Barrichello for his second pit stop. Meanwhile, Raikkonen was being held up by back markers, so Rubens was set to come out well ahead. Jenson Button temporarily led the race, although he had made one fewer pit stop than Rubens and Kimi, and appeared to be heading towards an alternate strategy. He wasn't the only one though. Here he is making his pit stop, although by this point Alonso and Ralf Schumacher had already been in for their second stops, and they appeared to be going to the end as well. Meanwhile, that's Michael Schumacher with a left rear puncture on track. Red is seen as a lucky colour in China, but clearly this was not a lucky weekend for Schumi, who turned 53 while this video was being made. In all honesty, while I never like to retroactively wish for a driver to do badly in a race, it's actually quite nice to see a Grand Prix from 2004 where Schumi didn't just run away with it, especially since he was already champion-elect. Some people even suggested that his spin in qualifying was deliberate in order to give others a chance, but I don't think that's in his nature. Is that a Toyota with a problem too? In the background there you see Ricardo Zonta retiring with a transmission failure. Goodness, it's not a good time to be painted red and white. With 20 laps to go, here's Kimi Raikkonen exiting the pit lane for the final time, having made his third stop relatively early. Don't be fooled by the BAR in the background there, because that's Sato, and Button is up the road from Kimi in net second place. By this point, Kimi knew that he had to pass Button on track, and the podium race was on. But not for Joel Baumgartner. Whoopsie. And there's Ralf Schumacher also recovering from a spin and dropping out of the top 5. Now watch this as he recovers, heads up to the final corner, then misses it, and spins! Whoa! It appears that he tried to go into the pit lane, then changed his mind again, and panicked. What a bizarre incident. There was more miscommunication in the pit lane, as he was instructed not to stop by his team, who said there were no tyres ready for him, but Ralf insisted that he had to stop and that he had a puncture. Then he seemingly attempted to park in the McLaren garage. It was total chaos, and Ralf retired from the race, possibly out of embarrassment more than anything else. Here's what happened to Ralf to cause this whole mess, with David Coulthard coming up the inside and colliding with him 2018 Toro Rosso style. What a rubbish way for Ralf Schumacher to return from injury. Then there was even more tyre trouble as Bruni's front left made a bid for freedom. That's real dangerous, you know. Thankfully for Barrichello, there was no safety car, and when he came in for his third and last stop, everything appeared to go well, and he came out ahead of both Button and Raikkonen. This was crucial, as it meant that he wouldn't need to pass anyone on track and could cruise home to victory. Schumacher versus Villeneuve. What is this, 97? Oh, it can't be. They're fighting for 11th and they didn't crash. Heading on to the final lap now, look how close the top 3 have become. Ignoring the lap Jaguar and Renault, the top 3 are Barrichello, Button and Raikkonen, and the latter 2 have been really pushing, setting some amazing lap times to try to catch the Ferrari in the final stage of the race. It was too little too late though. Rubens Barrichello came through to win the first ever Chinese Grand Prix by just a second over Jenson Button, and Kimi Raikkonen narrowly missed out on second place by less than half a second. The other point scorers were Alonso, Montoya, Sato, Fisichella and Massa, with Michael Schumacher only 12th. Guys, before I give this race a score, I want to let you know that I have a Daily Motion account for all the races that get taken down from my YouTube channel by the pesky FOM bots. Due to the high levels of parody, review and education my videos contain, as well as the short lengths of the clips I use, I believe that all of my videos fall under fair use, but sadly this isn't always enough. On my Daily Motion account, you can find the 1996 Monaco and Portuguese Grand Prix, as well as any other video that may end up being taken down from my YouTube channel. The link is in the description. Thank you. I gave the Grand Prix a 6.3 out of 10 overall for its genuinely really quite good on-track racing, and the unpredictability of having someone other than Schumacher up the front. Obviously there wasn't much of a championship implication, since Schumi had already wrapped up the title, but Barrichello's win did seal second place for him, while BAR scored some valuable points over their main rivals Renault. The bonus point is for the Shanghai track, which I actually quite like, even though it sometimes produces subpar races. I'll give the Driver of the Day award for Best Driver to Jenson Button, who I once again maintain should be celebrated just as much for his 2004 season as his 2009 one, and so nearly got his first win on this occasion. I'll give the Inouye Trophy for Worst Driver to Ralf Schumacher for this whole episode. Yes, I know he had damage, but this was just dangerous. His brother was a contender for the same award, unfortunately. Drive safely guys, Happy New Year, and I'll see you next time.